It's all about you.
am, I am Jill Stephenson. I am the mother of U.S. Army Ranger Corporal Benjamin Stephen Kopp. Ben was an actively serving Army Ranger who was on his third deployment and shot by a sniper and died of his wounds 8 days later at Walter Reed.
Awesome. So I want to welcome everybody to the Medal of Honor podcast, where we hear stories of strength, courage, and perseverance. I'm talking with Jill, who, like, as she mentioned, she's the mother of, she's a Gold Star spouse and the mother of Corporal. I'm
Gold
sorry?
Star. You called me a
Ooh, I
spouse.
did say spouse. My bad. See? Oh, goodness gracious. This is why I edit. So yeah, so she is the mother of Corporal Benjamin Stephen Copps, or is how you pronounce it, correct? All right. So we're going to be talking about what it's like to lose a family member who has served. And so we're going to be talking about Ben and what life was like a little bit before he joined the military and what life is like now for Jill. So the first question is that I want to jump to, because I think it was something that you and I have in common. Both of our grandfathers served in World War II. My grandfather was drafted into the Navy and served in World War II. The ship that he was on sunk, but he survived. And I think both of our grandfathers passed away about the same time, like a month apart from each other, literally. For my grandfather was March of 2001, and yours was April 2001.
Yes. Yep.
So tell me about your grandfather and about what it was that caused Ben to look up to him so much.
You are correct in that my grandfather did serve in World War II. He joined in 1939 and he served until 1945. So he was 6 years active duty. He was a 34th Infantry Division Red Bull out of the state of Minnesota, but he was from Michigan, ended up in Minnesota. But he served actually alongside the Rangers in North Africa, Italy, in the European conflicts, alongside the Derby Rangers, who were the first Rangers that actively served. And he earned a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star. He was the humble World War II veteran. He was not an ooh rah rah, everybody needs to join the military. He didn't come from a military family. He joined the military because that's what people did during World War II. He did have his medals and some other citations and certificates and photographs from his time in service that were on display in the cabin that he and my grandmother had in northern Minnesota. And Ben took notice of that cabinet when he was about 7 and started asking questions about what those items were in there. And he was very curious and wanted to know everything there was to know about what it was like for him to be in service during World War II. Obviously, he didn't understand, what the meanings of the different wars were, but that was his reference point because my grandfather had stated that he served in World War II. So Ben kept asking him those questions in his growing up years. I raised Ben as a single mom, and he was my only child. So my grandfather, Ben's great-grandfather, was the strongest male role model that he had in his life. He was also a very strong role model for me. He remains to this day a huge influence on who I became and lives, in a place of deep respect and admiration in my heart. I absolutely love him. He's my hero too. Ben saw that in him as well, and I wanted Ben to spend as much time with him as possible. I wanted him to rub off on Ben. And so we spent a lot of time with my grandparents at their cabin. And So in those growing up years, Ben got to know him, spent quality time with him, and came to love everything there was about him as a man. Being the World War II veteran was just one aspect of that, but it was something that Ben really honed in on. And so I knew from a young age that Ben had this attraction, if you will, for the military because of my grandfather, because he saw that in him and he saw how he carried himself, and he believed that that's where that his intestinal fortitude came from. But he did admire other things about him. You know, he when he completed his service, he became a postal carrier. So then he was a government employee and ran that out as a career and retired as a postal carrier. But he was married. He raised 6 children, and then he had grandchildren and great grandchildren, and they had a cabin that they shared with our entire family. It was shared with me, and they purchased it when I was 8 years old. And then, as I mentioned, Ben started noticing those things in the carrier cabinet when he was about 7. But I started bringing him up there as soon as I could, when he was a baby, not even a year old. So we had a lot of years of influence being around my grandparents, but Ben honed in on my grandpa. So it was everything about him that he admired. And then, when he was old enough, he started saying, I want to join the Army and be just like you. And my grandfather told Ben that imitation was not flattery. Don't be a copycat. Don't join the military just because I was in the military. He said, you're meant to be what you're meant to be. And one day you'll get a gut feeling. There will just be a knowing that you'll have of what that is. And he said, oh, okay, well, still, when I grew up, I want to join the military just like you. I want to join the Army. He didn't say military. He wanted to join the Army just like him. So when my grandfather passed away, when Ben was 13, which was April of 2001, he was absolutely devastated because he was his hero. And his time with him was now over. Very, very fortunate that he got to have 13 years with his great grandfather. Very fortunate. A lot of people, I know a lot of people who never even knew their grandparents. So it was an incredibly fortunate relationship to begin with. But Ben was so sad about it that he told me he didn't want to talk about it because it hurt too much. And I gave him that space. It wasn't difficult to give him that space because he was a 13-year-old boy. And 13-year-old boys, aren't real fond of having deep conversations with their parents, at all. And their language is a little more, grumbly and mumbly anyway. And so it was easy for me to give him that space. He stayed quiet for 5 months. 5 months later is when 9/11 happened. And when 9/11 happened, that deep sadness that Ben was feeling lit a fire in his belly of revenge. And he took it personal. His great-grandfather had fought to keep bad guys out of our country. We'll just put it that way. So for innocent people to die on U.S. soil at the hand of the enemy really made him want revenge. So he made a statement at that age as we were watching all of the footage together in his room. He said, when I'm old enough, I'm going to become an Army Ranger. I'm going to find Osama bin Laden. I'm going to make him pay. From that day forward, there was no doubt that Ben Kopp was the kid that was going to join the military right after high school. And there was just no question from that day forward that he was completely focused on joining the military. 9/11 became the true north for Ben. It locked in that trajectory of his life, and he never looked back from it. What happened on 9/11 to Ben was a mockery of his great-grandfather's service to America.
So before 9/11, he wanted to join the Army just for the sake of being like his great-grandfather, but 9/11 is really what definitely pushed him over the edge.
Oh yeah. Yes. Lit that fire in his belly, like I said. There was
Wow.
no looking back. No looking back.
So Ben is old enough to join. I think he depped in delayed entry program in 2006, but then went to basic in 2007.
2005 is when he signed up for the delayed entry program. And then 2006 is when he graduated. June of 2006, and he entered at MEPS in July 2006. And then 2007 is when he landed at the 3rd Ranger Battalion in February of 2007, but he had, completed all of his training.
So for people who are listening and don't know, there are some MOSs or jobs in the military where they do OSIT. OSIT is an acronym that stands for One Station Unit Training. So Ben was at Fort Benning. Ben at Benning, no pun intended.
Benning, yeah.
But he was at Fort Benning where they did the basic training, and their job training is one entire course. Whereas most people will go to basic training and then go to a different location to do their job training. But Ben did basic and AIT all in one thing, and then went right across Fort Benning and did airborne school, and then went to Ranger school.
And he did RIP.
Yes.
He did RIP. And then, no, he didn't go to Ranger school until July of 2007.
Okay. Well, that's awesome.
Well, not July. July is when he graduated. So he went to Ranger school shortly after he arrived at Battalion. And so I think he started it in May or April.
Yeah. And the people that I've met who have been to Ranger school say that it's an intense course. It's not a course where you just need to be physically fit. You have to be mentally strong and tough as well. So being mentally, physically, and emotionally strong is what you need to be before you can go into that course. And I had somebody in a unit of mine when I was stationed in Germany who physically, you knew he was going to rock it. Like he was just like he lived in the gym kind of person. And he went to RIP, and 2 weeks later came back and had his tail between his legs and was like, I don't know, I couldn't cut it. And the way he said that, I was like, that's why right there. But, and I think he went back later and did, maybe a year or two later, but still it's a tough school. And
yeah, it's a leadership course.
Yes.
You're learning leadership skills, and it very much is just as much mental as it is physical. It might even be more mental than it is physical, because you've got to be able to grab that last gear when you think you don't have any left. You got to be able to do that. They're sleep deprived, they're food deprived, and you have to stay on to complete the objective no matter what. And
he was 20, right? Was he 20 at that time?
He was 19.
So to me, and this is just my opinion, that's even the more commendable of him, because I was 19 when I joined the military. I turned 20 during basic training. And I can't imagine, on top of completing basic training and my job training, to then turn around and say, now you're going to be a leader. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And that's what he did. He did it well.
He did. Yeah. Ben was very driven from the time he reached high school. Really, that's when that really Well, he was driven from the age of 13, but he started playing football in high school, and that's when that drive really kicked in. And a lot of the fundamentals that he learned on the football field, he was able to apply to being a soldier. There's no I in team. It's not about me, it's about us. We're a team. It's all for one and one for all. But your individual effort is what makes the team, what helps the team succeed. And so, you're only as strong as your weakest link, right? And Ben never wanted to be that weakest link. He worked his butt off constantly, not just for football, but in life. He wanted things, and so he worked hard. He worked hard for them. He learned how to persevere and to never give up, and to beat the odds. He, by the time he graduated, he owned his fifth vehicle. He owned 5 vehicles. He had owned 2 snowmobiles and 4 cars. And I'm sorry, 5 cars. And so he knew how to get what he wanted. Perseverance was, capital P inside of his spirit. And so he took that with him when he joined the military. So it was not a surprise at all when, only 7 months after he landed at basic training, that he was assigned to a Ranger battalion.
So what I'd like to jump into now is his deployment. Well, I think he deployed twice to Iraq, but then the last one was to Afghanistan, correct?
Correct.
So that's something else too that I think a lot of people don't consider. Excuse me. You can go decades in the military and never deploy. But when you have some of those jobs, those combat armed jobs, deployments are not uncommon. So 3 deployments within 2 or 3 years, that's a lot.
Yeah, it was actually. He didn't go on his first deployment until 2007, and then 2008 and 2009. And as we talked about offline before, he truly was just in his 2nd year in the Ranger Battalion, and entered into that 3rd deployment in only 2 years.
Wow. So what I want to talk about, if you can give us the story behind what was going on when he got shot.
So prior to him leaving for that 3rd deployment, they were told that they were going into a hot zone. It was a place that had not seen combat for a long time, and they were going after high value target, which is what the objective is in any of those missions. And they knew that they were going to see combat at a level that he had probably not seen before. Even though he had been on 2 other deployments, this is what they were told. And Ben had some trepidations about that, some fears. He never said that he was afraid he was going to die or he was afraid something bad was going to happen. There was just something in his gut that didn't give him that normal fire in his belly to want to go out and kick some ass, like Rangers do. Like, the deployment is when you finally get to put your, where the rubber meets the road and your boots are finally on the ground and you get to go kick some ass. He wasn't feeling that. And in hindsight, I know why. I know why, because he did have a gut feeling that something was going to happen. He just couldn't put it to words. So he left for that deployment in mid-May of 2009. And I got a phone call from him on July 1st. That was he maybe had sent me an email or 2 prior to that. But in 2009, these guys there was never any Zoom calls. There was never any FaceTime. There was not text messaging, nothing. I had to wait until I got that call that all the numbers said 00000 00, all zeros, or unidentified, unknown caller. Those are the calls that I answered because I knew they were him. Communication was a lot more strict back then. So I got a phone call from him on July 1st. And so he was, had been gone about 6-7 weeks at that point, getting close to being done with that, more than halfway through that deployment. Anyway, he told me that things were as bad and ugly as they had been projected, as they had been told. And he sounded far away. His voice sounded normal, but I could tell that spiritually, emotionally, he was far away. I could hear it. And there was a lot that he couldn't tell me, which was normal as being, a special operator. There's a lot that they can't tell anybody. We gotta keep the keep things secret, if you will. And so we just had as, deep of a conversation as we could. I'm like, are you okay? Yeah, Mom, I'm okay. It's really hot. We're working all night long. There's no running water. We just have bottles of water. That's what we drink. They're warm. That's what we shower with, rinse our bodies off with. I could just tell that he was uncomfortable where he was. I don't know if uncomfortable is the right word, but there was just something distant, very distant about him. So
Like he was unsettled, maybe?
Unsettled, yeah. I mean, it was just as bad and nasty as he had been told it was going to be. Mm-hmm. And I could hear that. We talked about his future. He had read, was reading a book by a ranger named Jeff Strucker. You might know that name from Mogadishu, Black Hawk Down.
Yeah, he became a chaplain later on.
He did become a chaplain.
Yeah, he became a chaplain.
In fact, at that moment, I didn't know it, and neither did Ben. He was the regimental or battalion chaplain for 3rd Ranger Battalion at that time.
Oh, wow.
Might have been regimental. I don't know. I still know Major Strucker, very well. I'm in contact with him, but at the time I didn't. Anyway, and neither did Ben. He just had was reading his book called The Road to Unafraid. And it was about his journey from leaving active duty to pursue his call to be a chaplain. And Ben was very inspired by that. And Strucker had also, fought in the streets of Somalia and Mogadishu. And Black Hawk Down came out as a book and a movie around the time, between the times of when my grandfather passed away and 9/11 happened. And that's what struck Ben about wanting to become an Army Ranger. He admired him from way back then. So now he was reading about, Jeff Strucker being that Ranger as well from that era. And then he had also competed in Best Ranger competition, and Ben had aspirations to do that. So we talked about him doing that when he got out and maybe training for it. He was a little concerned because he had some back issues from weightlifting. But anyway, so we had maybe about a 15-minute conversation. We ended it like we always do by saying, I love you. And then the next call I got was 9 days later on the 10th of July, telling me that he had been shot by a sniper. At that point, he had undergone surgery to repair the leg, remove the bullet and repair his leg, but he had not yet woken up. And what had happened is...
If you don't mind, before we jump into that, can you, with the surgery and everything, can you talk about what his mission was, like what he was doing at that time?
Yeah. So their team of snipers, Ben was a gun team leader, and there were 3 snipers that were pinned down by a Taliban sniper, and help was not coming. It was too dangerous, and they had called for help, and it wasn't coming. And so Ben was called forward as that gun team leader And he saved those 3 snipers and 3 other Rangers that were up front there. And one of those snipers has said that he had a grenade in his hand and he was seconds away from pulling the pin, because he would have rather died at his own hand than go down by the bullet of a sniper. He did not want to die at the hand of the enemy. And then Ben came forward, and it was Ben's leadership and willingness to come forward that saved him and those other 5 guys. So Ben saved 6 guys in that battle that essentially cost him his life. The other 2 guys that were shot, they were not critical injuries. One was shot in the foot and one was shot in the shoulder, his platoon leader, and they were okay. But Ben's injury was a little more serious, and they were about an hour away. I don't know how many clicks that was. I don't understand how to unpack that or compare it to, miles and feet and yards, whatever. But it was about an hour away. Ben had to be carried through water, dirty water, because that's the area that they were. And then he was put on a helicopter and then brought to a surgical center, underwent that surgery, and then essentially did not wake up. He was transferred out of Afghanistan, did about 24 hours in Landstuhl. Oh, I need to go backwards. When he was recovering, he had a cardiac arrest in Afghanistan when he was recovering from the surgery. And they were able to revive him, but he had lost oxygen at that point. And so when they went to turn the anesthesia down to wake him up, he didn't respond. And normally when that happens, somebody starts to wake up, and when they're conscious, they want to remove that breathing tube from their throat because it's uncomfortable, and now they can breathe on their own and they can speak and they want it out. Ben had no response to that. So they knew at that point that there was something wrong, but they were able to stabilize him, and they got him, like I said, about 24 hours in Landstuhl at the Army Medical Center there. While he was there, his brain began to swell, and he was having not seizures, but they called it his brain pressures were difficult to control, but he was stable enough to land back at Walter Reed 4 days after he was shot. So he landed at Walter Reed on July 14th. And on July 15th, the next morning, my mother and I sat down with the doctor who was in charge of his care, the lead doctor, and he told us that they believed that Ben was brain dead. And that was due to that lack of oxygen. They, at that point, had only done manual testing, and the manual testing includes, looking for a pupil response to light, and then a nerve response from poking the bottom of the feet and the palms of the hand, and Ben did not respond. What came next is they had to use a very specific piece of equipment to determine that there was, in fact, no blood flowing to his brain. And that was a very cumbersome piece of equipment, and the patient had to be stabilized in order for the test to be completed. So it was going to be several days before that was available. As I mentioned, this was the 15th of July, and that test was not done until the 18th of July. And it was determined at exactly 1 o'clock on July 18th, 2009, that there was no blood flowing to his brain. So he was determined to be dead. The death certificate calls his death July 18th, 1 o'clock, 2009. So in the meeting that we had after the initial meeting of being told that Ben was brain dead, that doctor asked me if I would consider donating Ben's organs. because that brain death enabled him to be an organ donor. And I said, yes. We had to find out if Ben had made those wishes known himself, because he was an adult, he was over 18. And so the decision would be up to him had he made those wishes known in writing somewhere. So we went in search of that, and we found it in his Blue Book document. There was actually a question that asked, in the event of your death, do you wish to become an organ donor? And Ben wrote yes. And the question that followed that asked which ones, and Ben wrote in any that are needed. And so upon his death, he underwent surgery to recover those organs, and he then saved 4 more lives with the donation of his heart, kidneys, and liver. And then he enhanced the lives of 55 more people with the donation of his bone, skin, and tissue. So he saved 6 guys on the battlefield, and then 4 lives upon his death.
Hence, twice a hero.
Twice a hero, yep, in life and in death.
Yeah, that's amazing. So for you personally, I can't even begin to imagine what it was like having to deal with all of that. I mean, those 8 days, well, shoot, even just being a parent of somebody who's deployed can be rough. So during that week and since that week, how has it been for you to deal with that, I guess, or handle yourself as you realized your only son was no longer here?
It actually ended up being an entire month. That
Okay.
From the time I was notified that Ben was shot on July 10th to his funeral at Arlington on August 7th. So it's July 10th to August 7th. It was that whole month of when I was dealing with all of that stuff, him being in the hospital, and then getting him back to Minnesota to have a funeral in Minnesota where, he grew up and where I lived at the time, and then getting his body back out to DC and having that funeral in Arlington, and then, finally going home from Arlington after that. It was tough. I mean, I never imagined that anything would happen to Ben. I just didn't. I never went there in my mind. Never did. And why would I? I don't know. I don't, as a parent, I can only speak for myself, but I never imagined that my child would die. It just is not a place that you go. Like, what if? And even if I did, you don't know how you're going to feel.
Well, I think a lot of times people, I hear people say a lot of times that you're not supposed to bury your kids. Your kids are supposed to be burying you.
Yeah, in the realm of life, it is allegedly out of order. However, I know a lot of people who have buried their children. It's not out of order. It seems like it, because, chronologically, we're supposed to outlive our children because we're older. I mean, they're supposed to outlive us. I said it backwards. They're supposed to outlive us. Old people die first, but that's not how life works. And, I think a lot of people can attest to that by people that they know, and especially in the military community. Especially in the military community. But
Yeah.
it's difficult, though. It's not a reality that I ever wanted to know, but I know it now. And, tomorrow will be 16 years since that day, when Ben was declared brain dead. And it doesn't get any easier. It doesn't ever get easier. 16 years later, it still hurts. It still hurts just as much.
Yeah.
It,
And you said something before we recorded today that and I had heard stories like this, but I never saw it to be real or this powerful. But somebody, an older person, had gotten his heart, and which added, I think, 15, 16 years to that person's life. But that really impacted you when that person passed away.
right. Yeah. There was the woman who got Ben's heart was 57 when she got the heart of a 21-year-old Army Ranger. So if you can imagine, going backwards in your life, which is what it feels like her years, her age got dialed back, 21 to 57, what's that, 36 years. So you would think that 36 years would get added onto her life, and the average lifespan is, we'll say 70. So she should have lived to be over 100, right? and and I subconsciously, I think that I thought she would, that she somehow became almost immortal when she got Ben's heart.
I don't know if I'd want to live that long, though.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a topic for a whole
yeah,
nother podcast, honestly. But
right.
just thinking about it, taking away, all the other what ifs. But if you're 57 and you can trade in your 57-year-old heart for a 21-year-old heart, I mean, just think about that right there. Like, oh my goodness, you're going to live forever. You're going to live forever. But what I didn't consider was that she might die from something else. I didn't consider that. I did think about the fact that I knew one day I would get a call that she died. But I had no idea how I would feel when I got that call. And I didn't expect it to come for a long time for the reasons I already stated. So it was in March of this year. So just, 4 months ago, 5 months ago, we were 4 plus 3, it's 3 months ago, for whatever.
You said March, April, May,
March,
June,
yeah,
July. Yeah, 4.
4 months ago. I was shocked. I was literally shocked. She died of cancer. She died from cancer, completely unrelated to her heart, completely unrelated to her heart. And it was a short-term illness. It was something that it wasn't long lasting. And I don't know, it hit me really hard when I got that news. And I think it's because up until that point, so she got 15 years and 7 months with Ben's heart. That's a long time. So she was 72 when she passed away. She was 2 months shy of her next birthday. But up until that time, I had been able to tell people, and his heart is still beating. His heart is still beating. In, a woman from Chicago, now Florida. And that was incredible. Like, his heart was still beating. And there was a blogger, in fact, in 2009, a military blogger, when he learned the story of Ben and that, his heart was able to, be recycled, if you will, and save the life of somebody else, that Ben Kopp was the Army Ranger who couldn't be killed. Or Ben Kopp was the Army Ranger who refused to die because his heart literally never stopped beating. And now the narrative of that story changed to where that heart of the Ranger finally stopped beating. And it honestly felt like he died again. And in a way he did, in a way he did. It was his second death, right? It was his second death. The first one being, when his heart was recovered from him. And then the second one being, when it stopped beating in Judy. And I wasn't the only one who felt that way. There were people that, were close to Ben's story with me and had, grown to know and love him over the years through me, and people that grew up with him who, when I shared the news with them, they cried. And just like I did, I cried harder than I had cried in many years when I got that news. And it wasn't because I had a deep love for Judy. It was because of my great love for Ben. And that, again, like I said, it was like now he's finally no longer living. That's what it felt like. And it came as a surprise to me. Like I said, I had no idea how I would feel when I got that news. And it was a little surprising to me. And I think also when the wound of losing a child is deep, very, very, very deep. And over the years, you just develop this very thick scab and you learn to live with it. It's forever a part of who you are. You never are not aware that it's there. It's always, always there. And when I got word that Judy died, it was like that scab got ripped off. And it's healing again. It's healing again. It felt like the grief again. It really did. Like the journey, went 2 steps back. And even though it's been almost 16 years. So I'm okay now. I'm always going to be okay. My faith is what has got me through every minute of every day, from day one on July 10th to now. And Ben saved lives on the battlefield. Those men that he saved, went on to become husbands and fathers. And, they have spouses and children, and will probably, hopefully one day have grandchildren because Ben saved their lives. There are 4 people who got Ben's organs who went on to do things in their life that they wouldn't have been able to do had it not been for Ben. And, Ben's heart stayed with Judy until the very end. He never left her. He never left her.
I think that's awesome. I really do. And, that kind of goes back to something you said earlier about the whole, you shouldn't bury your kids, but what you had said was it's not really out of order. And I think that's something we don't look at, that I believe every person was created on purpose and with a purpose. And that could have been Ben's purpose, was to help other people live on, whether it's because he protected them in battle or provide an organ to them to keep them on earth a little bit longer.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. Yeah, we don't know the number of our days, but God does. And I believe that is set from the time we're born. Time we're born in, and those trepidations and that fear that Ben was feeling in advance of that deployment was very likely the knowing that his days were numbered.
So the thing that, like, to get to where we're going to wrap up, one of the questions I want to ask is, especially with Ben's heart not beating anymore since earlier this year, just months ago, well, not how are you handling it, but how would you recommend to people to, if they're stuck in the middle of something like that, whether they've lost a loved one, whatever the case may be, how would you encourage people to get up and move forward? Not get over it, because I don't think that's a thing, but to move forward.
Yeah. The first thing I would do is, for me, plug into your faith. If you're a person of faith, plug into it. Reach out to someone in your church, to a pastor, or see if they have a grief group within the boundaries of your church or the walls of your church. My faith has been my number one resource in all these years. I lost a brother when I was 15, and I was able to plug into my faith back then. That's when the foundation of my faith was where it was built from, and I've taken it with me all these years. The next thing is community or tribe. Find other people that have experienced what you have. In the military community, it's fairly easy to do, especially, around times, when Ben was wounded and essentially died. I mean, there was a lot of, the war was active, the global war on terrorism was very active. And so there were people around me and events that happened in honor of our fallen that made it easy for me to connect to them. But what military families, whether you're a Gold Star family like myself or a surviving family member, if your loved one, ever served in the military or, died of some other reason while in the military, you have survivor outreach services. And they are, I don't know that they're in all 50 states. If they don't have a location in your state, they do have a regional office that's fairly close. Or sometimes they have multiple offices in a state, depending on, how big they are. I lived in Arkansas, up until just a few months ago, and, they had an office in Little Rock, and then they had one, closer to me in Northwest Arkansas. And here their offices are, they have one in Oklahoma City. I'm in near Tulsa now, and then they have one up here in Tulsa. But Survivor Outreach Services has a lot of resources that are available to military families. And I would highly recommend contacting them for resources, just to find out, where maybe some grief groups are, or if you have questions about what benefits are available to you, whatever your role is in the family. Otherwise, for me, my faith in finding that tribe that understands my grief journey, understands the language, the military language, and then just the things that are surrounding you in relation to the military, about the death. So we've experienced, battalion memorials or unit memorials. Our loved ones are laid to rest in a military cemetery. The aftermath of, can I be a member of a VFW or an American Legion, which are also good resources if you don't have the availability or the opportunity to find the other ones I mentioned. Those places also have resources available. There's no shortage of them. There's absolutely no shortage of them. But in anything that we experience in life, that's difficult, any adversity, I think it's essential to find other people that are walking where you walked, or they've already been where you've been. They've walked where you walked, and they have wisdom and experience and knowledge about whatever that situation is, and they can help you through it. That's what's helped me. That's what's helped me. I mean, there are a lot of organizations out there. There's small ones that may be just community-based. I've met a number of families over the years who started their own nonprofits or own little businesses in honor of their loved one, and they reach out and help other people. I did a memorial event for my son for 12 years in the state of Minnesota, where I lived, and raised money to help veterans. Because if my son had survived and got out of the military, he would have been a veteran from the state of Minnesota. So that was my way of paying forward, or to continue to give in his name and in his honor. So they can be small, local, or they could be national levels. I've benefited from the generosity of the Gary Sinise Foundation, America's Mighty Warriors, Three Rangers Foundation. TAPS has resources as well. So there's really no shortage of them. I'm also willing, if anybody, wants to know about grief counseling. I am a certified grief counselor. That's also just something that's very common, is for people to give back to our own community, because it helps in our healing process, is to help those, as I mentioned, who are coming behind us, because I now have wisdom and knowledge of 16 years of being a survivor, and not just surviving, but thriving, the best that I can. So there's a plethora of resources available.
That's awesome.
Families.
Yeah, there are, and that's something that I've looked at too, even having people come on to the podcast. So many of them share their personal story of something that they experienced, and they started a nonprofit because X, Y, and Z. So I think that's great.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for doing this with me today. It's great. I love hearing people's stories, and like you said, Perseverance was his middle name, I think, instead of Stephen.
It was. Ben. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. I'm being special, not on purpose. Why is it doing this or not doing this? Man, I'm clicking on it, but it's not doing. Come on. Okay, well, it says live on air. I've tried stopping, but it's not. I'm not sure what the deal is. So
Now I can't hear you. Hello?
hey, I have no idea why it was being special. There was a couple of glitches that I'm going to talk to them about this afternoon and say, hey, what happened here?
Do you want me to just hang up on this then? Because it's still recording me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, go ahead and hang up.